Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much to Natasha and organisers for inviting me to give this talk at the We Love Games event. The lineup looks great, and I hope to join some of you in the discussions during the break. I'm going to talk about, my talk's kind of split into three parts. One is my research area that I've been working on the last 15 years, which is the broader use and application of games technology. I'll also talk about my role as Head of Division of Games Technology and Mathematics at the University of Abertay, and also my role in Women in Games. So I'm one of the executive board members, and I'm responsible for the education theme and also work on the research theme alongside Marie Claire. So it may seem a little bit of an eclectic mix, but hopefully as I'm talking through these, you'll see the common theme of games and diversification, both in technology and the workforce. So this picture, or these pictures, kind of state the claim how, in terms of the broad application of games technology. So they've been used to map the skeletons of dinosaurs and structures of fossil through to glacier advancement and gait analysis. And typically the types of game technology that might be used is the sensor technology, because it's much cheaper than what would maybe be used in the traditional sector. So here we've got the Connect, which is allowing the players to have gestural input and map into the game that they're playing. Some repurposing of that exactly same technology has been used to scan a massive skull of I think it was a T-Rex, but if you're interested, look up the Nature paper. And this, using this technology, the museum was able to have a fairly detailed 3D model of the skull, and they were able to do other analysis such as dental analysis on this sculpture or model based on the 3D image obtained. So I guess you can see that, you know, the creative and scientific uses of video games technology are quite broad, and my working definition in this case of games technology is any hardware or software which includes game consoles, peripherals, including AR, VR, I/O devices, hardware sensors, through to graphics engines and graphics APIs. And I've pretty much used the latter in some of the research that I'll talk a bit about. So games technology has evolved and become more sophisticated based on the investment into the games industry in particular. So I would consider myself an interdisciplinary researcher. I saw the benefits of using games technology in my own kind of scientific researcher through dialogue with my games colleagues when I was in a different faculty or school. And so I really saw that using some of the tools that are used typically for games, but for scientific visualization, can really help bring our simulation models to life by turning them into pictures and bringing systems to life, and that's specifically for environmental and societal challenges. So the characteristics of game technology that make them amenable to other areas are customization in terms of how you display the data, interactivity, which is implicit for games. You get that for free. All games are interactive to some degree. Aesthetics and design, so some built-in reward to keep you interacting, and optimization, so especially for console games where a lot of the code was fine-tuned for a specific hardware. So the key one I'm really going to focus on is this kind of customization and optimization, so these two. So with the advent of programmable pipelines, it meant that designers, artists and programmers were able to invent new visualization techniques and how to display their data, rather than being constrained by some off-the-shelf software. And I think this was particularly important when researchers were working maybe in areas where they had dense data, structured data, so 3D data, or multi-scalar data that's varied over space and time. And then optimization. So a lot of these existing, there was a flurry of activity that looked at porting existing scientific models onto the GPU, really making use of that architecture to make our simulations run faster. So the work I've been involved with really is using games technology specifically, or the GPU, for speeding up our simulations and for delivering more pleasing ways to interrogate the simulation output. More recently, we've kind of combined this with artificial intelligence, and I think this will be an area for future endeavours where we are actually building platforms that combine simulation, interactive visualization and AI. But for the most part, it's these two that I'll talk a bit about. So the application areas for me have been around sustainable development, so these challenging or wicked problems in the environment and society. I've worked in spaces from urban planning, the built environment, through to whole systems modelling of water, energy, food. And where I see true value of the interactive visualization is it really does open up the dialogue for a wider audience, such as the public, researchers, charities. And I've kind of worked with these different types of stakeholders on different projects that you'll hear a little bit about as we go through. So my undergraduate degree was in physics. I was always quite fascinated in pattern formation and the work of Turing in terms of how complicated patterns or behaviours can emerge from quite simple rules and interactions. And as part of my PhD, I developed a framework, theoretical framework for pattern formation in microbial systems, and then ported that over to the GPU to make it run a little bit faster. And so now, speeding up simulations using the GPU is much easier than it was 10, 15 years ago, where there wasn't an awful lot of high-level programming environments to do that. So now you have frameworks such as NVIDIA's OpenAC, which, if you know which parts of your code would be beneficial for running on the GPU, you just have to specify which bits they are, and all the data management is done behind the scenes for you, which tends to be the tricky aspect. So this type of simulation, these reaction diffusion Turing patterns, have been used in games for real-time texture synthesis, for example. So another example of the GPU work is through simulating and rendering shallow water equations. So this is work that was done by a PhD student. So again, shallow waters, is a reasonably common feature in games, and you want to have all of the effects that go with dynamic water, such as foaming of water, interaction with bodies that are floating on the water, or objects. And so this work done by Peter Parner really looked at using DirectX 12 how to optimize the shallow water equations to streamline them to run using a single pass on the GPU, but then also adding in some visual effects and that coupling with those bodies. So the bodies here are these 3D primitives that are getting chucked on the water. And you can see a little bit of splashing in some cases, and the buoyant forces at work. So Peter spent a bit of time, coming up with a high-order numerical solver for the shallow water equations that could be computed in a single pass. Then he spent a bit of time on looking at the visual effects. So he added in reflection and refraction, surface details, caustics, and particle effects all into the application. And so it was running real time, reasonable frame rates, which was quite nice. So I guess that's giving you an example of how we can use the GPU for both simulation and for visualization for things that might feature in games, so shallow water bodies and textures. But what I was more interested in was the use of games technology in harder problems. So things like sustainable development. And the problem with solving some of the challenges that we have in this space is that there's usually many constraints to satisfy. There's multiple stakeholders, there's different data streams. There's never a single solution. Everybody wants something slightly different out of the situation, and we're dealing with an uncertain future. So this particular project where we're looking at different energy solutions across the water energy food nexus. Now the energy solution was AD, anaerobic digestion, so food waste is an input. So what we were looking at was modelling both, well, the water, the energy and the food system and their interconnections, coming up with a model for that, and then looking at different implementations of that energy solution and seeing how it would potentially cope in different futures. So it's fine to look at the here and now and the business as usual scenario, but how would a intervention operate in these different alternative views of the world, and which are often quite divergent. So it's important when you're looking for solutions now in these multi-objective spaces to also see how well they do or how robust they are to different futures. And so for this we came up with a framework of the different types of interactive visualizations that one might have, and how these different interactive visualizations really depended on the level of interaction afforded by the user and the subject expertise or knowledge of the user. So we range from like a visual simulation where the user has a reasonably good understanding of the system. There's an underlying model that's pre-computed, and then the data is just fed to some UI and analytics engine that displays the information that's required. The other option might be you have a playable system. So this is where the user has more control over setting the system up and the interventions to explore. And you are getting some parameters and metrics back out from the different scenarios under investigation. And then the final one is a game system. So this kind of user, would know a little bit about the system. Then the game system is really there when the audience maybe doesn't know much at all about the system under study, and the whole purpose of the game simulation is to highlight the connections and the system that is being studied. So I guess the advantages of the interactive visualization is engagement, and that's delivered through well-designed playable simulation, drawing on games design, aesthetics and user experience. Experimental, so it's a space to explore and ask what-if questions and understand the consequence of those what-if questions. They can develop skills, so playable simulations may promote systems thinking, as they offer open-ended experiences for the players, and they highlight cause and effect, so the players build or construct a mental model-based reasoning on their experiences. And then observation. So in these type of interactive visualizations, it's not about depicting an answer, because we've kind of mentioned there isn't a single solution, there's a variety of solutions. It's just understanding what those upper and lower bounds are and the constraints. But really the interactive visualizations there is to understand the components and their connections and the effect of altering one part of the system on the other. And then this is a bit tangential, but I just want to throw it in there to show that we're exploring this space. So on that previous slide, we talked a little bit about games used as skill building or learning. I think there's lots of, in literature, games and learning is routinely explored. We're working with our psychology department to employ a variety of analytics and controlled experiments in an existing game which teaches students how to program to understand what is it that people are actually learning when they're playing this game. And so the idea is that we'll develop experimental methodologies and metrics that should serve as a guide for instructional design of learning technologies. So that there's maybe procedures or processes that are in place that help people develop games that will aid learning. So far I've kind of mainly focused on the use of the GPU for simulation and for rendering. I'm going to talk a little bit about two projects that use games technology beyond just the GPU, and this is work that is associated with in-game. So I'm a co-investigator of in-game. In-game is one of the AHRC UK creative clusters for computer games. It explores new audiences and interdisciplinary working relationships, as well as creating new content and models for gaming. In-game also considers the translation of games and games technology out into other domains. So a recent project that I'm involved with that secured UKRI audience funding is linked to sustainable food production in the future, and it's the use of data, AI and game technology for tools for dairy farmers, vets and stocksmen. So it's in collaboration with a smart dairy farm down in Bristol, where they've got loads of data streams that are telling you about the health of individual animals in the herd. And all these different data streams, they don't really talk to one another, so we're looking at building an integrated data lake where the vet or the stocksman can maybe ID a cow through some computer vision algorithm. So it might be through the HoloLens or mobile phone, and then it would detect the ID of the animal and then draw down all the relevant information to do with its health and productivity. This could be useful for triaging when the stocksman's got a herd of 200 animals and can't get round to see them all, for example. Then another example using again game technology and AI is a data-driven machine learning approach which mines an existing data set which holds stories about patients that have been recently diagnosed with cancer and the services that they uptake. So this is 5 years worth of data that shows the associations between concerns, cancer type, demographics and services uptaken. So this could be a useful training tool for a new link worker that is a way to visit somebody in their home and maybe wants to understand, well, what are the typical and atypical concerns of a individual that has cancer X and these demographics, for example. So the game technology here is the use of the games engine to develop the front end UI. Behind that we have the AI that is mining the data set. So I'm going to just take a little bit of a detour here and talk a little bit about games education at Abertay. So we've been running games courses for 23 years. We started in 1997 with the MSc in Computer Games Technology, and the last course developed was Professional Masters Game Development. And these different courses reflect the different subject areas in the games industry, so programming, art, design, for example, and they're a mix of both undergraduate and postgrad. And what we can see from our 23 years of data is that there is some improvement that needs to happen in terms of gender balance on some of the courses. So if we look at the UK-wide higher education statistics agency data for the games courses split against female and male for the last 5 years, you can see that the number of females participating in the games programming course or games programming and design courses is pretty dismal. It's up about 10% in 2018-2019. So myself as head of division, I'm actively trying to increase that. I must say it varies dependent on the course. So in the arts and the design courses, there's much higher percentage of female participation, and the gender is more balanced. It's just really on the games programs that have a lot of programming and maths in them. So some of the initiatives that Abertay is running is diversifying curricula, including reading lists and well-considered marketing materials. So Abertay used to always use Grand Theft Auto as a marketing material, but if you can just see on this slide the richness of games that are being developed now by the students. So it's really about shouting about the diversity of games and the type of games that can be made, and I think we're definitely seeing more diversification in the type of games that are made. Embarking in initiatives like Athena Swans, the university has the Athena Swan Bronze Award, and obviously my role as the board member in Women in Games and making sure that the students are aware and participate in that community of practice. So Women in Games is a not-for-profit organisation founded in 2009. It provides encouragement, support and advocacy for women and girls throughout the games industries and educational pipeline, both nationally and internationally. Our mission at Women in Games is to achieve full equality of opportunity and treatment for all women working or wanting to work in the games and esports industries. So over the last 11 years, we've been raising awareness and implementing initiatives that change attitudes, deliver impact and create conditions for all women in the sector to thrive and reach their full potential. So one of the initiatives that Women in Games launched was to create a diversity playbook, so how to increase diversity in your studio. So this was work that was done with Google and Facebook. Another initiative that is very successful is the Women in Games Ambassador Programme, led by Gemma Johnson-Brown. In 2017, we launched the Women in Games individual ambassadors with the support of Google Women Tech Makers. We now have over 400 individual ambassadors across the globe. And just before our conference, which I'll tell you a little bit more about, on the next slide, we launched our educational ambassador scheme, and that's really aimed at connecting educational establishments with industry. And if you're interested in the educational ambassadors, just drop me a line. I can give you a little bit more information. So last month, we had our first ever fully virtual Women in Games Global Conference. I'm going to just play this.
We are more excited than ever to help champion some of the most inspiring women working in the games industry.
Women make up 46% of gamers.
No matter what gender, no matter what colour your skin is, there is a place for you here.
It will require probably a lot of work, lots of sleepless nights, lots of tears sometimes, but the right attitude is really what makes the difference.
So it was a huge success based on the level of participation. So we had over 1,000 people register for the event, and the feedback that we got from the event. Now it was under the direction of Marie Claire, the CEO, that we felt that it was so important, given the COVID-19 global disruption, that there was a place where the community could come together and connect and share experience and support each other and inspire each other. And I think the virtual element to the conference definitely did help with that connection. So we had a mix of activities, keynotes, panels, in conversation, shared insights, as well as sessions for imparting knowledge, such as learning labs. And there was lots of breakouts and networking opportunities. And so what that definitely did open up was the need for potentially more online events to support the community and for us to be responsive to the needs of our community. So from some of the initial findings, a mentoring program looks like it's of interest to the community, as well as more data on female participation in the games industry. So the data that exists is quite patchy. There isn't really anything that surveys the educational pipeline to the granularity that we need in terms of the percentage of women on those different types of games courses. We're also looking at other research opportunities with other partners, with the research partners on female leadership. So Aviva's keynote was particularly helpful and opening up a whole series of questions that might be of interest to the community, and more online events that might connect industry with education, and not just traditional education as in HE and FE, but alternative pathways. So just to summarise, I would say that games technology has enormous reach and impact. Games tech has offered many benefits and will continue to offer many benefits, especially in terms of that AR and VR space. So some of the benefits are better workflows and productivity when integrated with data pipelines, better science communication, supporting planning and service provision across sectors, and understanding systems. My personal view is that game tech for complex systems or playable systems will evolve, and it will really combine simulation, graphics and AI, and we kind of touched a little bit on those throughout this talk. And the final point that I just want to leave you with is that diversity is key, in not just in terms of diversification of games technology, but also diversity is key in workforce. And I think that's the one thing that ties this talk together. So I'm going to leave it there, and I believe there will be Q&A after this. So thank you very much.
Out now, do you think has the most impressive physics simulations?
Okay, so it's a very good question. So thanks, Tina. There's a couple of games that spring to mind for different reasons. So one would be Sea of Thieves has quite good water simulation. And I think it links quite nicely with some of the AI behind the movement of the sea creatures in Sea of Thieves. So that would be definitely one to highlight. Another game, more so for the realism of the effects rather than the game itself, would be Metro Exodus. So that game is really using the latest ray tracing technology to have real-time reflections in the puddles and in the shallow waters in the game. So I would say those two games are a couple of the ones that use either physics-based simulation or they're using the latest kind of ray tracing technology for the visual effects, the graphics effects.
If I may add to that, especially, for example, the Last of Us 2.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the quality of it. Let's not talk about game design and narrative decisions kind of there, but when it comes to the graphics and the visuals, absolutely, I think that's one of the top-notch qualities of the graphics at the moment out there. Yeah, let's see. Do we have more questions? Actually, I have a question. As you also said that I mean, you also gave a talk about the women in games, and this is also one of the reasons why we are here today, of improving the diversity and making sure that everyone feels included, and that there is the whole, the culture of sharing is there. And as a also professor at university, I know you already gave this, but what are your takeaways of being both, like from the academic side, but also this sort of community builder, as you are, especially from the education and spreading that. So, what would be the kind of like the tips for others to possibly get more involved with women in games, for example, international? What the ambassadors actually do, and so on. So if you can tell us more about those, because we really definitely want to have more people involved.
Great. Okay, no problem at all, Natasha. So there's lots of opportunities that people can become involved and get involved with women in games, and it really is a community of action where people support each other. There's different events that are organised based on the type of member you are. So I did loosely talk a little bit about the ambassador scheme, but there's many ways that you can be an ambassador for women in games. So this initiative is run by my colleague Gemma Johnson-Brown. And so we have individual ambassadors, so anyone can join. I mean, there's a short kind of vetting process where you apply through an application. So if anybody today in the audience is interested, if you just go to the Women in Games website, at the very bottom, there's an application form that you fill out, which has your details in it and maybe ideas for future events and why you want to become a Women in Games ambassador. And through that network, so I think now we have over 400 ambassadors, which are distributed across the world. They're not all in UK or Europe, in 47 different countries. And what you, I guess, get as a benefit from being Women in Games ambassador is there's a group, on Facebook and LinkedIn, a Discord channel as well, where you can learn from fellow ambassadors about the types of events. So there's lots of different events that ambassadors put on. They might visit a university to give a talk. They might go to a local primary or secondary school to inspire kids and to, I guess, make them aware of games as a career. I think at this stage, a lot of teachers maybe don't understand the diversity of subject areas within games. So I think there's a piece to be done there, and I know a lot of ambassadors involved in that. Some other events that ambassadors have run are coffee mornings, so virtual coffee mornings, a way to connect and keep the community connected now that we're all online. Game jams, so some of the individual ambassadors have also run game jams, and sometimes that's associated with another organisation, a university or college. So there's quite a lot of different ways, and the ambassadors also get support from the Women in Games organisation in terms of materials for running some of these events, and a little bit of funding to help organise it. So that's the individual ambassadors. And if you look at the web page, you could see that the individual ambassadors are from all stages of their career. So we have students that are at college or university, through to people that are working and have high level jobs in game studios, through to professors. So it is very varied. So I think there's a lot of learning that you could do from that community as a individual ambassador. We also have corporate ambassadors, and that's really for game studios. So anyone that's serious about equality and diversity, if they become a corporate ambassador, then again they get some of the benefits from the Women in Games network, and that includes some dialogue with our CEO, Marie-Claire Eisenman, who would maybe visit the studio. This is some of the things that have happened in the past, and giving them some tips on how they can actually improve the culture of their organisation. And then the other way that you could become involved
as women in games, if you're an educational establishment, is to become an educational ambassador. And I think this scheme is very important for maybe universities that have a smaller number of games students, because it really then allows those students to connect with that wide range of stakeholders in women in games, which are maybe fellow students, people working in industry, as well as, you know, people that are running community events. So I would say the ways that people can get involved in women in games is very varied. You know, we are open to and supportive of anyone that wants to become an ambassador for women in games, and would help develop individuals as well.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much. But I just want to give one comment on this. So, I, as a fellow educator also, I mean, I really believe, and this is something fantastic to hear also, that the organizations are really taking this seriously, is that the only way we can actually make difference, especially for the future, for the next generation of developers and you know, fellow community members as well, is through education, because that's where the real difference will be made. I mean, that's the only way to change the right mindset towards diversity inclusion. So that's really so empowering to hear. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for sharing all your know-how. And I'm hoping to. So yes, everyone online, please feel free to ask more things in our Discord channel, and also Ruth will be with us here and there throughout the day. And of course, don't hesitate to be in touch directly with Dr. Falconer by email, or so. You can find all on also Women in Games website. So yes, thank you, Ruth, so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Natasha.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.